Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'd like to convene this interim study subcommittee meeting of the Children and Family Law Committee to take a look at House Bill 1269 relative to the use of child restraints in schools. And I'm Representative Peter Petrino from Milford. I serve as the clerk on Children and Family Law. And if the other members would introduce themselves.
Good morning. I'm Representative Long from Manchester.
And good morning, I'm Representative Deb DeSimone from Atkinson.
Good morning. I'm Representative Jody Nelson from Derry.
Heather Raymond from Nashua. I am Cassilvek from Barrington.
And I'm Candace Gibbons from Manchester.
And thank you all for being here. I do appreciate that. So the purpose of our meeting is to take a look at House Bill 1269. And when it came before Children and Family Law, I had some concerns with the bill as proposed. And initially, my inclination was going to be to recommend ITL. But hearing the testimony of many parents, it was heartfelt. And I felt it would be very insensitive if we just dismissed this legislation and didn't discuss it any further, considering the testimony of the parents. So that's why I requested that we take a look at it as an interim study. So, and that's where we are today. You take a look at the bill as proposed, amending RSA 126U5B. It talks about as soon as practical, pursuant to RSA 189-68, Roman numeral 5D, each use of seclusion shall be visually and auditorily recorded if such method of recording is included in the student's individualized educational program or accommodating plan. Another part that was added to the statute in this bill was pursuant to RSA 189-68, Roman numeral 5D, each use of restraint shall be visually and auditorily recorded if such method of recording is included in the student's individual educational program or accommodation plan. And my concern with that language is that students with IEPs are mainstreamed. And from my perspective, this would mean that every classroom and every school would have to be equipped with surveillances. And so that was my initial concern and my inclination again to ITL it. But before the committee begins discussing this in detail, I see we have some individuals who are here, and this is not public testimony. We've heard testimony, but I do welcome any of you to come forward if you want to add any insight or just any perspectives you may have before we begin. But again, this is not public testimony because we've already heard the testimony, we've looked at this bill, and now we're going to take a look at its merits and maybe make some recommendations going forward. So with that, you are welcome to come forward if you're so inclined. If not, we will commence. Maureen, definitely. Just turn on the microphone and introduce yourself and where you're from.
Oh, is it on? That's odd because it's red instead of green. Usually I'm used to it being green. So thank you. I'm Maureen Tracy. I'm from Merrimack, New Hampshire. And I was the one who kind of grabbed the legislators together to kind of discuss this because of the number of calls that I was receiving from families who you all saw. That was just a small portion of them. And honestly, I was just cleaning my house one day and I'm like, how can I try to help stop this or lessen this? And that the cameras came into my mind to address just quickly the concern in regards to in the classroom. I in my 25 plus years of education have not really seen a child restrained in a regular ed classroom. It doesn't typically happen in front of other people, and that's why. And I didn't make this language. I wasn't that excited about this, but some attorney put it together and put it through. All I'm looking for is somebody else to be able to have a voice when a child is either put in a restraint or seclusion or comes home with an injury and they can't communicate. That's really what I'm looking for. So is it a person? Is it a camera? Is it a camera on an adult? I don't know, but one of the one of the legislations that passed last year was covered bridges would have cameras because people are putting graffiti on them in the middle of the night when nobody's there and they want to protect them. And I'm like, how do we protect our kids? And I am willing to work 1 day a week on research or anything that you would like if you come up with an idea that would really help to give children a voice when they have been hurt, restrained, or secluded. That's really all I'm asking for. There are two sides to every story. When I first started in education, when I was working at UNH, I used to visit so many different schools, so many different places, and people, I guess I was unassuming, people would not change their behavior in front of me. And I have seen kids thrown against the wall. I have seen kids thrown onto the ground. I've seen it, and it mostly happens in the middle school. We're not really talking about high school. It's usually around 8 to 10, 7 to 11 is the average age of when this happens. So that's what I would like. I would be willing to give really any research, anything that you would like, any questions, 1 day a week, if that's something that the committee would like. That's all. Thank you.
Would you be open to any questions?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Before I entertain the other reps, one quick question. If I recall, you brought to my attention statute in the state of Maine that you thought was something that we could model. Okay, all right, that's important to know because I did take a look at the statute and I'm looking at in their RSA specifically line item 6 that talks about technical assistance. And I think this may be what you were referring to, so just correct me if that's the case. It says the department shall provide technical assistance to covered entities by developing, implementing, and providing technical assistance to support evidence-based programs that reduce the likelihood of physical restraint and support students in reducing behavior that can result in physical restraint, such as developmentally appropriate positive behavior interventions, functional behavior interventions, mental health support, restorative justice programs, trauma-informed care, and crises in de-escalation interventions. Was that the part of the statute that you were making reference to?
Yes, and I do believe that we do have some of that in our both state and federal laws. And I actually was one of the first and only PBIS coordinators here in the state. I have worked with many schools on exactly implementing and teaching FBA's PBIS throughout school districts. The hardest thing is, for what I see, is that the people where this is happening are the least trained, and they don't want to tell anybody that they made a mistake, and therefore it escalates. And we really need to support those people. One of the concerns I just saw was Londonderry is looking for para-educators, and they're paying something like, don't quote me, but say $17.25 for a para-educator who assists the classroom, and like $17.95 to work with the behavior kid. Really? That's that's just saying that it's not that much difference. And it is. It is. And it's not fair to the adults or the young people if you're not trained properly. And then I'm going to tell you, they feel embarrassed that they got this to happen. And then they blame the kid because that's what happens. Right. So that's what I see.
Well, thank you. And I was taking a look at our statute in section 126U1A. It talks about limitations of child restraint practices. And it seems, the way I read it, that there's some similarity in that main statute. It says, the Department of Education and the Department of Labor shall work cooperatively to develop consistent definitions and applications of this chapter in order to inform school administrators and employees across the state of best practices regarding restraint in schools. The Department of Education may utilize grant funds that are available through the department's Office of Students' Wellness for trauma responsive training, consulting on de-escalating violent situations and proper use of restraints. So I'm seeing very similar language in New Hampshire statute, in my view, seems to be somewhat consistent with what they have in Maine. So
Yep.
what are your thoughts in that regard?
So my thoughts in that regard is that I think the state, in my view, the state was doing a really good job pre-COVID. After COVID, anxiety went up in everybody, adults and young people. And I think that led to more behaviors, as well as a lot of people left the field. So I think that's a lot. One of the things that I did research, and I believe it was Mississippi, is not putting something like this underneath child restraints, but instead under child safety, including, and it was included in a bill in regards to having like locked front doors and all of that stuff. So it was, and then it went into, cameras in the hallway, cameras in the lunchroom, because we have cameras everywhere. We really do, even in the schools. So looking at it as far as having it maybe not in RSA 126U, in restraints and seclusion, because it's not just around restraints and seclusion. It's kind of, we're putting kids who are vulnerable in a room away from other people, and things happen. That's, I guess, the bottom line.
Okay, thank you. Representative Gibbons, I saw your hand up. Do you have a question?
Oh, I did, but it got answered. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Representative Long?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it looks like two efforts on here. One is regarding the restraint itself. The less, the better. Then the other one is regarding the notification. Now, the 1269 was more on the notification. And the issues I had was the prior to using seclusion or restraint, the parent had to be notified. That's not always.
I don't think that's reasonable at all. Okay. I don't think that I didn't come up with that. I don't think that's a reasonable part. No.
Okay. So as far as I agree that a parent should be notified for all kids, even if they can't express what happened to them. I think the parent ought to know what
right after
child who's secluded or restrained, the parent ought to be told. So I guess what we're looking for is who would be responsible for that, right?
Mm-hmm. And I believe there is already information, and Karen Rosenberg is here. She could probably let you know. I believe we're already supposed to be doing that, is notifying the parent right away. And let me tell you about functional behavior assessment, and that's one of the things I taught. Functional behavior assessment is who, what, when, where, how, why. And you want to grab that data and be able to look at it and prevent it. And I've prevented it. Like I've done this work. That's why I can say that it works. And we're not collecting that information, who, what, when, where, how, why. And instead, if you read, and I would love for you to read any incident reports, it's very vague. This is what the child did. No, like it's almost like they were in a room by themselves and that there was nobody else there to intervening. And typically an adult is looking what the trigger is. And so I'll give you my first experience with restraint. I was teaching preschool, and there was a student who had autism. This was way back, so autism wasn't as known as it is now. And the student did not want to put their hand in paint. And this teacher came over and put their hand in the paint, and the student like freaked out and then was put on the ground and held down. And it was like, that was not worth, having this huge problem going on, right? So what we want to know is we want to prevent that from happening again. So, and I could give you a million different examples of how these things get triggered, but it's understanding and preventing it is the biggest thing. Yes. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Representative Raymond.
Thank you. Very briefly, have you seen the new reporting form that came out? I know that I'm in Nashua and we adopted it in March, and it is 15 pages long, and it specifically has, you have to list every staff member that was involved. You have to say that all of the events preceding it, you have to explain any interventions that happened before the event. And then there's a narrative, and there's a bunch of check boxes to trigger people to think about what things they should be using for next time. You have to provide a narrative justifying the reason that restraint or seclusion or a hold was used. You have to document any injuries that occurred before or after the seclusion, whether the child was injured during the seclusion, whether the staff member was injured. It goes on and on. And so I'm wondering if, and then in Nashua, we require notification immediately by phone, which is consistent, but we also require the parent to have a copy of this form, and that the form be reviewed by the superintendent, and the parent to get a report from the superintendent saying he's reviewed it, he's talked to all the staff, and this is what his investigation found. So I guess my question is, given that most of this detail is new, it wasn't state law before, and a lot of places, there were a lot of inconsistencies across the state. Does this cover some of those circumstances where it provides some evidence for what's going on?
I would say yes, it does in regards to restraint and seclusion, but I just want to remind you that some of the people that testified, their kid was not restrained or secluded, but came home with injuries. So that's another thing. But I think that this is the difference. I have seen that, but I have not seen it filled out. And I think that's the key. There was good paperwork to fill out before that I have seen, but it's how it's filled out, and people are not always. And usually, again, we're going back to direct support professionals. They are not always trained. In my experience as a teacher, as an educator, things would come down from the state. They would get funneled, through the special administrator, maybe a coordinator. It hardly ever gets down to the paraprofessionals, and they don't have a lot of information. And the main thing that they go back on for evidence-based practices is CPI,
Right.
and that's like the same thing over and over and over again.
Right. So, I mean, it sounds like this is I don't know, I guess for me, we're on day 4, 5 of school. So I'd like to see people using it. And I know in Nashua, we've got Dr. Green coming down specifically to train our paraeducators. So hopefully more districts can do that kind of stuff.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hello, good
Hello.
morning.
Good morning.
So I'm seeing this, if we are able to craft a bill, I'm seeing that this would be sort of like a two-prong reasoning. One, for the protection of the children, and 2, for training purposes, so you can review the incident and make sure that people are trained properly in order to handle it, and in the future maybe not have it get to a point of escalation. Is that what you would like to see?
I think that's beautiful. Yes, I think that's beautiful. My experience. So I was an educator. My daughter was on spring break or whatever break and came and substituted in a school that I was working in, and they put her with the hardest kid who was nonverbal. Luckily, she has a sister who has Prader-Willi syndrome, and she has lots of experience, but they didn't know that, right? So I think, yeah. And what was? Can you back up? I'm sorry. The original question too was.
So we would see this bill as two reasons, right? For the protection of the child, and also for training purposes, so that incident could be reviewed and make sure that proper procedure was followed, and if there was room to have prevented a further escalation.
Yes, and in my experience again too, what I see is I see, so picture any one of you all of a sudden was given a student who was nonverbal and all of a sudden started acting out and you weren't sure how to do it. What we do is we go back to how we were raised. That, you know, that's kind of what was our discipline growing up. And unfortunately, a lot of what I see is ego that kind of gets in the way. Like, you're not going to tell me what to do. You're only 10 years old or whatever. I do see a lot of that. I think when I taught at higher ed, what I really instructed my teachers is really making sure to have somebody feel safe that they made a mistake and not reprimanded, and say, okay, how do we go back and look at that and make sure that doesn't happen again? Because it's hard. It's not easy working with somebody who may be nonverbal, who has behavior. And again, and I always say it's not good versus bad. It's skills versus lack of. But I really think more support needs to be caring for the paraprofessionals so that they can say, I think I made a mistake. I think I set them off, instead of,
I'm sorry. I have another question. It's not really a follow-up, but it's related to. Okay, thank you. I forgot. I should have asked you this
Okay.
too. There was a mother that came here, and it was very. I was very emotional about all of the testimony on this day, and this one mother in particular talked about her son in seclusion. For privacy purposes of the child, do you think that a camera, my thought would be to have a camera outside of the seclusion room to monitor who goes in and out, because we have limits of time, right? Where by law, people need to be, going in and out. What would your thought be on that? Either are you pro or con a camera in the seclusion room, and or pro or con a camera outside of the seclusion room?
I think the most important aspect to look at that is what happened prior, so that you can learn and prevent it afterwards. But typically what I have seen is that there's a classroom with a seclusion room in it. And I think what you just said, I don't think it needs to be inside of it. I think kind of seeing what happened in the beginning. And like in that instance, that went on way too long before you even got in there, right? So there were so many different pivotal points that you could have turned it around. You're welcome.
Other questions? Representative DeSimone?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been thinking a lot about this because, like Representative Nelson, and I'm not speaking for the rest of the committee, but my thought is that we were all very concerned after all of that testimony. My thought is the protection of the child first, and the training and the protection of the adult involved in the incident as well. So my thought is, rather than having surveillance cameras, what are your thoughts about having a body cam that the adult in the situation could use it like a panic button when the incident originates in the classroom before we get to seclusion? The recording begins all the way up to and including seclusion. What are your thoughts about that?
I think that might be a good idea. I don't know if anybody's ever done it. I think the biggest thing about that, and again, I don't see this in the classroom. I see this, they're moved away into a, and that's the thing, is they're moved away into a place where nobody else is. I can guarantee you will not find a restraint in the lunchroom, in the front office. You're not going to find it. And if you do, it's very, very rare. That might be something that, all of a sudden, but I think that, again, you want to get it right when it's way beginning, so that, again, you can prevent it from happening again. But that could be a really good idea.
Representative Gibbons?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for my knowledge purposes, how are they how are they restraining the children? Because there's like an infinite amount of ways to restrain somebody. So I work in a hospital, and so we have like various methods. the least restrictive would be like a vest or something, whereas the a little bit more restrictive would be wrist restraints, but they're soft, so they're not going to cause like injury if they're used properly. Up to like if someone's really being violent, then there can be like leather restraints. So, but that's hospital based. I don't know what school based is. So
School-based is usually it's hands-on. So it's, it's not medical, it's not, any type of drug or anything like that. And I've never seen any equipment. It's hands-on, and it's typically, so I have seen, again, and this is the most scariest one, in the prone, and when you're not supposed to do prone,
Right.
but I have seen it. So prone is, face down, holding them down, and then I don't forget, my daughter knows them all. There's a basket hold in all of these, but the ones where you're really being held down. And if you think, so, just a little, this is what happens to our brains. In our brains, we have an amygdala that goes off and says fight or flight. We could all go into fight or flight if we were walking down the street in Boston and somebody came after us. That's what we would do. And theirs are being sometimes set off quickly, and it takes about 20 minutes. But what happens is, if you're now holding down this person, you're now increasing the length of the escalation, because there's continuing to be in fight or flight. So there, I would say, underneath the arms and being held down, but typically then being brought into a seclusion room to sit there and try to de-escalate yourself. And it's such a catch-22. All right, you don't want anything in the room that they could hurt themselves in, but then again, you put them in a padded room with the door, and people will tell you that they don't lock the door. I'm going to tell you, I had one principal say, "This is what we do," and this was in the last year, and he put his foot up against the door. There's no lock there, but this is
But
what
it's
I do.
barricaded,
I put my foot against the door so the child can't come out. And those are the things that we want to see, because and then the adults are going into fight or flight too when this happens. Like, we go, oh my goodness, there's something horrible going on, right? So again, there's tends to be, everybody has patterns of behavior. So it tends to be, so a kid might go, "I hate this," or "this is stupid." And that begins this whole chain of events that, if not dealt with over here, it tends to go all the way down there. And honestly, for children, it becomes comfortable. And I did have one student who was restrained over 300 times in 1 year, who would walk off the bus and try to get himself restrained so it would be done. So he could just get it out and know that, okay, and then move on from the day.
So in other words, the injuries are from hands and
Right,
stuff.
right.
So they're usually like on the forearms.
Yeah, or
and-
trying to get away, and then they fall and they bump their head because they're trying to get away. Because if anybody's holding you down,
Sure.
you're trying to get away, right? And people will say, well, they weren't staying still. Well, they're not going to. They're young, and they're feeling that they're going to be held, and they know after the first time, they know what's happening. They know the routine.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Ms. Tracy?
Yeah,
Chairman Long?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So of the IEP students, are there restraints or seclusions for somebody who's not in
I typically only see that maybe if somebody has like a 504, you don't, I have not experienced a typical student get a restraint or seclusion, have not experienced that. If that does, that usually triggers to start doing an evaluation for what we call invisible disabilities, right? And those tend to come out actually sometimes until we get to school. So here you are, a parent thinking everything's okay, and then you bring them into school, and then they're not responding in the environment. So that's what I typically see. I have never in my life, looking at data or information or observed a typical student being restrained or secluded.
Right, so this committee's concentrating on IEP wouldn't be a disservice. That should be what we're.
Yeah, I don't think, And again, in this language here, it says that, that to put it in an IEP, any parent can have that already put in an IEP. But this is the problem, that most parents aren't educated. And I'll tell you, parents are embarrassed. Who wants to tell anybody that their kid's having a behavior problem and needed to be held down or restrained at school? They're not telling people that. So then they just sit there, and especially the lower socioeconomics, you know, they're embarrassed and ashamed of it. And they're trying to, you know, they may even go home and now they're getting in trouble again because of what happened in school.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Tracy. We do
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you. Thank
you.
you for telling me.
Is there anyone else who'd like to come forward and just add some insights to this issue? Okay, seeing none. I'll entertain discussion among committee members. I know two members in particular who have some things that they do want to share. Representative Disimone, you had some thoughts you wanted to share specifically regarding body cameras? And we had our researcher go out and do some research in that regard.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. You did, I did ask you, and you did comply with asking our researcher to get the information that we all have on body cams. I have concerns about surveillance cameras in schools where the incidences may happen, like all incidences where kids have to be restrained don't always happen in the classroom. They might happen in the locker room. They might happen in the bathroom. And if you're having surveillance cameras in there, you're going to be seeing things that nobody really should see. So again, it's my concern that other students who are going to school able to get through their academic day, end the school day, and go home are going to be on these surveillance cameras, and their privacy is infringed upon. On the other hand, the kids who go to school and are not able to do that because of whatever the reason are, and for every kid that can't get through the school day, you have a different reason why they can't get through the school day. Those kids need to be protected insofar as being able to report to the educators, the parents, and more importantly, their doctors. What caused this kid to act out? What did the teacher or whomever else it was in the school, what did they do to help de-escalate this child in things of that sort? And what works and what doesn't work? It's all inclusive, I believe, in educating that child and how that child needs to be educated. And I think that a panic button in and of itself is only going to bring a myriad of people into the situation, which can escalate the situation, not de-escalate the situation. But a body cam on a particular teacher that is used like a panic button. Oh, this child is getting tense, acting out. Boom, push the panic button. Let's see what we did right. Let's see what we did wrong. It's helping the child, and it can be used as a teaching tool for all other professionals in the business. I hate having cameras and invading anybody's privacy, but I think in this case, it could help in that respect.
Representative Gibbons, I think, has a question or a comment.
Thank you. Yes, just piggybacking off of what Representative DeSimone said, I understand where you're coming from. My concern would be the people that don't want to push the body camera on. body camera, like turn it on, for whatever reason, because I don't want to word it as want to be violent, but they don't want their actions seen because they don't want reprimand, or the situation might be so highly escalated that they might just innocently forget to turn it on. So I foresee problems if it manually has to be turned on, but I do see where you're going, where you don't necessarily want to put up like cameras in bathrooms, but you might end up having a situation in a bathroom. So in other words, I think that a better solution might be to have the body camera, but not always to rely on it. And have like the cameras in the room that are kind of always surveilling, so that they really only have to push the button if they're in like a predicament, like in a bathroom or something like that. And that there might be consequences for the staff member if they don't turn it on when they should have. But that gets hairy, because like what I was just saying, if the situation is that highly escalated, they might just instantly forget to turn it on. So to me, it's a catch-22, where I just don't know what the best solution is. But I do see where you're going with it.
Representative Nelson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with both of you. And I just have another spin on recording. So I did some research and I shared with you guys yesterday. There are 3 states who do have laws regarding videoing, and they're all specific to the use of cameras in special education settings, in the special education rooms only. And I think that they all are not mandatory. So it would be they may, or could be wrong on that part. But we also had some states, Louisiana, New Jersey, Massachusetts, New York, and Florida, who had bills, and they were not passed. I don't have that much information on why they did not pass. I apologize about that. So we do have some, prior statutes in other states that we can kind of look at too.
Thank you for doing that research. Representative Raymond?
I think my concern is the expense. I'm just thinking about the expense of body cameras. I know, like, when Nashua initially got body cameras for our police force, it was $350,000 a year, and our police force is orders of magnitude less than our staff at school, like 100 times less than the number of people we would need them for staff at school. So I just cannot imagine in a place where we're having difficulty finding and paying paraeducators that school districts would have the money to do something like this. I'm actually not opposed to expanding video cameras. We already have them in classrooms and in hallways, not typically classrooms, but hallways, cafeterias, other, main areas in many of the high schools across the state. So I could see expanding them to certain other areas. But I worry about the practical parts of it, the money, and to spend enormous expense investing in these things, maintaining them, and then not to spend enormous amounts of money on the training and the recruitment and the retention of people who do have this, who develop the skills and then maintain the skills to react more appropriately. I just feel like when we have a limited pool of money, you put the pool of money into teaching the skills, not, buying cameras.
Representative Long?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in my mind, there's no doubt that video and audio would be the best. However, it's what will that video and audio capture? And it's putting the teacher, there's another thing they've got to remember is not only do I got to deal with this, how am I going to deal with this? Oh, I got to turn this on. Those are the liabilities that I question. I would think body cams, you could get a body cam that wouldn't have a wide range. You know, it would have a direct range where you're not getting other kids or what have you. So that, in my mind, that would be the best. Now, with respect to these forms, are they district drafted, or is it New Hampshire?
So we took the technical advisory from the state Department of Education and put it into our computer system. But I believe most of the state has the same essential facts that are being required. The Department of Education made the technical advisory. It just didn't come out until March. So school districts haven't had a long time to create their own forms, integrate it into their technology, and then get it out to everybody.
And does somebody review those forms?
So I don't know what the rule is everywhere. In Nashua, our policy that the school board passed requires that somebody, like the building level principal administrator, has to review them, and that that the superintendent's office also has to review them, because we wanted. I was very affected by some of the testimony here, and I was very disheartened to see the number of restraints and seclusions in some of the schools. So we wanted to make sure that there were multiple eyes looking at these things, and that parents were having multiple communications from the school about what was happening. But again, we started training the staff. I'm saying we, I had nothing to do with it. They started training the staff over the summer for the back to school stuff. But the school's only been in session for 5 days. The kindergartners just started yesterday. I'm not aware yet of, what seclusions have happened. The other thing that came out in our local discussion about restraint and seclusion as the National Board of Ed really wanted to dive into this topic, was, what constitutes a restraint and seclusion. And the interpretation of our board was, if a child is running away on the playground, right, and they need to be stopped so they don't run into traffic, that is a restraint and seclusion, because it's not seclusion, it's a restraint. We've stopped the child. If you have kids who are fighting in the hallway at the high school and they are separated by administrators, that qualifies as an incident of restraint and seclusion, and staff should be using this form and informing all the parties. So we made our definition more broad than what was presented here today.
So, and I'm also, just to close, I'm also thinking that audio and video can be, if it happens to capture other students, then, that could be, somebody could go over that and get rid of the, block off or what have you. And as far as finances, I'm not even concerned about that. What is, in my mind, what is the best? And then let people in finance figure out if we got that, right?
Representative Gibbons and then Representative Nelson.
Thank you. As far as the financial part, we could put into the bill like a step-up plan, because the financial portion of it says that it's indeterminable. So once they realize what the actual cost and do an assessment is, we could just put in there that they have like X number of years to get it fully implemented and just do what they can, in the meantime. Also, they don't have to get the most expensive cameras out there. That, in this day and age, there's you can shop on Amazon and there's cameras that are extremely cheap that work very well. And assuming that there's decent Wi-Fi, you can just connect it to the Wi-Fi and, so in other words, you just don't, there are ways to minimize the costs. And if we did a step up plan to it, then that might work. That might be a solution. Also, just want to go back to, point number 2, the part in italics. It says prior to the use of and immediately after. We could change that to or, knowing that sometimes it might be impossible to notify them prior to. In the best case solution, like what the testimony we just heard where the kindergartner just didn't want to put their hands in the paint, and was getting like escalated because of that, you know, sure, they would have the time to contact the parent prior to, but if it's a fight in the hallway, they're not going to necessarily have time to, you know, so we can be realistic about this and just change that to or, because prior to is sometimes impossible.
Representative Nelson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the Texas law, it provides that the cameras may be funded through the solicitation or acceptance of gifts, grants, and donations. And that, you know, that might be something that could be considered as well, to defray the cost.
And Representative Long.
Actually, it's another subject. So.
Oh, okay, just in that regard, I mean, I do agree with Representative Long that our concern is not finances. We're all about policy, and then finance has got to deal with it. But I am concerned about unfunded mandates on the local level because every school district is different, and some are really struggling with finances and others are not. So any kind of financing that comes down, in my view, needs to come from the state or through grants. But that's just my 2 cents. No pun intended regarding money. Representative Long.
Chairman, so what I'm thinking here is that the IEP would have a plan that would allow you, so there could be somebody in the IEP that would say, no, I don't want my child recorded at any time, correct? So this would be only for people who said yes, that would work. Okay, so I don't know what those percentages are. I don't know how many parents would say, yeah, at no moment do I want my child recorded or audioed. Okay, so it's not. It may not be as bad as what we're thinking. You know, it may be just a few more kids, you know, again, if we could just get over the, you know, what's the liability for a parent not turning it on? Or it happens to be tilted for some reason and I'm filming her instead of him, right? You know, I mean, you know, those are the only things that I would like to see a protection there. You know, and then you're going to get somebody who's saying, I've had it up to here. I'm not turning this on because I'm not going to do some good things. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You know, and that's, you know, how do you figure that out?
Representative Nelson.
Thank you. I'm feeling the same way as Representative Long. I like the idea of body cams, but for those reasons, I'm thinking, you know, the cameras in the special ed classroom only might be something to think about too. I do know that we have a lot of pushback about cameras in classrooms because of concerns of privacy in the workplace for the teachers, concerns about privacy of parents for their children. But we do have these 3 states that have made it work. So only in the special education rooms.
Okay, any other thoughts to share? All right, seeing none, the question now is how do we go forward? So needless to say, the HB 1269 expired when the session expired. So it's for us to decide whether or not we want to file legislation. Any one of us can file legislation. Representatives of a similar mindset might decide that they want to sit down and coordinate and draw up something that ultimately can be presented again. Listening to discussion, it sounds like we have all different ideas and concerns, and we're not really at a place where we have a consensus. We're talking a little bit, maybe cameras. Definitely there needs to be some more teacher training. Funding is a question, not necessarily for us because that's not our purview. So is there anyone who wishes to take the lead in terms of maybe drafting something? Or do you wish to come back and have further discussion? So I'm open to anything, because this is challenging, no doubt.
So if I could, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, can we take a discussion? Could we take a consensus on camera use? I mean, I mean, there's a lot of, scenarios that would go with my approval of that. But I mean, I'm thinking of being a parent and not knowing why my kid has a shiner. You know, and you know, the parent tells me, I'm not sure how that happened. You know, and it could be legitimate. So audio and video is the best way. We have audio and video today. You know, it's not antiquated. Like I said, there are small videos and, you know, we could zoom in on the child and the para. So I you know, so I don't know where we go on agreeing with speculation, you know, with contingencies on using camera and audio for the para. Would we consider that would be the question. Yeah, what directions, I'm thinking of this bill and as it relates to the parent, from a parent, and I'm not knowing what's going on, I'm upset. And the best way to know is the show. Because even if I tell, I don't believe you, you know, you get into that scenario. You know, or if I look at the form, is everything on the form? Well, I don't know. You know, maybe they had to fill out 6 forms that day, you know? So, yeah.
Representative Gibbons?
I mean, I think we're all in agreement. People can speak up if they're not, but that in general, this is good. It's just the minor details that we're trying to figure out. So, I mean, I do think we should probably just revise those minor details and maybe submit it again for the, you know, for 2025.
Well, my suggestion in that regard, if we were to do that, I'd like us to review whatever is put forth, because ultimately it's going to come before the full committee. So I'd like us to have a handle on anything that's put forth
Right.
before it comes to us formally when we're in session. That's just my thought in that regard.
Right.
So can we do a report as to, you know, we agree that this should be brought forward in further legislation. A couple of discussions were the cameras, contingent upon, you know, the focus on the child and the parent, not the child sitting next to him or whatever. Same with audio. I mean, you know, in my mind, fixing the parent knowing, seeing is going to give them the best comfort. You know, this is, yeah, you know, maybe you'll see something that happened that wasn't written down. We didn't see it, you know?
Representative Raymond?
So I still am not comfortable with the idea of putting body cameras on teachers. I'm just not. I mean, I think we have discussions at you know, the state level about whether or not we should arm teachers, and now we have discussions about body camera teachers, and I just feel like we might as well just have police officers do it, since we're going to also have discussions about what books teachers can teach. Like, at some point we have to let professionals be professional. Having said that, I'm not opposed to having recordings of incidents, and I think child protection is important, and I think it's paramount. There is in law already, under the criminal statutes for wiretapping, a whole section about how audio and video recordings are supposed to happen on school buses and how that gets approved by the school. Like, it has to go through the school board, and how who's allowed to access it and how long it can be retained. And I think that if we're going to talk about adding audio and video recording elsewhere, like, we really ought to start looking at some of those statutes as opposed to trying to create something new out of, you know, cobbling stuff together.
Yeah, so
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
we're not looking at, we're not looking at something new. We're not even gonna put in the language that some legislator may put in. We're just given what our discussions were. My understanding is this is in special ed classrooms only. So we're not having all teachers wear body cams. It's just suited for this, and it's specific to children that can't communicate. So I don't know if I was to bring legislative forward, I would exempt children that can communicate. So I mean, the bottom line to me is, how do I assure a parent that they know everything that happened? The best way is showing them.
Just a bit regarding the comment you made. The bill as presented does not specify special ed classrooms, but students who have IEPs, and they're mainstreamed. And so this legislation would imply that cameras would be everywhere. So when we go forth, if we are to talk about surveillance, I'm hearing from you that it would be specific to special ed classrooms. Representative Nelson.
I agree with Representative Long's concerns, and I have to say, just personal experience. Both of my biological children, unfortunately, have inherited the clumsy gene from me, and they've come home with bumps on the head and fat lip. And it's just because they're clumsy and they, leaned over and hit their face on the desk or whatever. But the report that you get from the school nurse or the teacher, whomever calls me at home, can be corroborated by the child, right? So, hey, I got a phone call from the nurse today. What happened? Matching up, and it's the same thing, right? But these kids cannot do that, and that is a huge concern for me too.
Any other thoughts or discussion? Okay, so hearing none, do I take it, Representative Long, that you might be inclined to draft something? I don't want to put that on you, but just.
Things and lose an election.
And other like-minded individuals, Representative DeSimone?
I would like.
We're not going to put in language that we would do if we were putting in legislation, because we would look at what Representative Raymond, look at the other statutes, and then it may not come to children or family, it may go to education.
Right.
But yeah, just note what we discussed and what we were made aware of and what we would recommend, and then let them take it from there.
Okay, so Representative DeSimone actually made a motion that Representative Long
We
draw
don't
up
have
a
to really
report.
vote on it.
And we don't have to vote on that, just Representative DeSimone's microphone was off, so I just wanted to make that clear for the record. And so that's good to know. So that's where we're going to go forward. And when do we anticipate maybe this would be done and we should reconvene another meeting? Do we want to set a date now for that, or just wait till you get back and we can
Yeah, I-
formally announce that later?
What's today? Wednesday? So by next week.
Okay, and then,
Actually, if you give
The
me a
day
date,
after.
if you give me a date when we're gonna meet, that'll tell you when I'm gonna write this up.
all right. Well, let's do that. Let's just take a look at our calendars and we'll get back to each other very, very quickly and
So-
we'll let Representative Long know, and then we can schedule another time to meet.
So it'll only be a review of the recommendation.
Yes, Representative Gibbons.
I just want to repeat that I think it's important for the prior use of, comma, and immediately after to be changed to or as part of the recommendation. I know that that's a minor detail, but I think it's significant.
And, what do you guys think of, I have issues with, as soon as practical, that leaves the door open for.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's not,
they could specify how many hours that, I mean, in the hospital, like if we had to put someone in restraints, we have like a certain amount of time before we have to let the doctor know and get an order. So it is possible that they could say like you have 1 hour to notify the family after someone had to be restrained. So, and that would come back to a staff training issue where they would have to be notified that that's the new policy, but it is possible. So
Okay, wonderful. So before we adjourn, I do want to remind everyone that on Monday, September 23rd, the Joint Office of the Child Advocate in Waypoint is going to have a documentary screening of The Kids We Lose. And I think everyone did receive this card. There was also a mailing as well as an email. So I'll be in attendance, followed by a panel discussion with Dr. Ross Green. And the documentary, it's an award-winning documentary, and it deals with the topic that we are currently grappling with. So I think that's important for us to take a look at. That might assist us as we move forward. And we all know that we can file legislation in November, so we still have plenty of time moving forward. So with that, if I hear no other questions or comments or thoughts, I guess we'll adjourn and wait to hear an email of a definitive time when we'll meet again. All right. How's that sound, everybody? All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
So Pat, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna type these up on the computer
okay.
and I'll send them to our committee researcher, right?
Right, Karen, right?
Karen
or
No,
who-
Kristen Grant.
Kristen Grant.
Kristen Grant.